There it is. Episode 27. We're back. Another one.
You're Adam.
Yeah, we better make sure we do that. I'm still Adam.
Yeah, and I'm still Steve.
There it is. This is a Whiteboard Sessions podcast.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Just right. It's fun talking to people, like when we're seeing people throughout the week on and off. Mm-hmm. And those of you that are tuning in and give us the feedback, about this stuff, definitely appreciate the loyalty that people have had for this. It's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, we have fun with it. So
yeah,
it's appreciate
good.
You.
Yeah, it's good.
So how are things been? Good?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, very good. You too?
Yeah, same.
Yeah?
Full days, but that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
So today I was thinking, so it was a couple podcasts ago we did energy, and for some reason that one did like really well. I was, I was pleasantly surprised by that one. I did energy, and then maybe the last one or the one before was communication.
Yep.
So inadvertently we kept doing the pillars of the Hegele business, today I thought we'd continue with the last two pillars are relationships and commitment we'll get to.
Yeah.
But right off the bat today, I wanted to talk about relationships. And now this is a lot to unpack. This is a huge pillar.
You're jacked up today.
I am. I'm ready to rock. Let's do this. I think it's one of the pillars of the business, but I also think it's the heart of the business. And I know that might sound cheesy between you and I, because one of the sayings you have is at the heart of every business is relationships, and that's not up for discussion. And so I think between the two of us, there's going to be a lot to unpack in a 15-minute podcast, but we'll see what we can get to, because there's relationships within an organization. There's relationships with customers.
Yep.
Relationships with vendors. And I mean, there's just so much, not to mention personal relationships and how good relationships really benefit a business, and how what goes into a good relationship and good workings of a relationship.
And just to interrupt, the internal relationships in a business is like a spider web. Mm-hmm. The relationships between management and labor, the internal relationships between different departments, the peer-to-peer relationships with people, on a team and so on and so forth. So when we say that it's the heart of the business, it really is the heart of the business. And some people might say, well, give me a break, you guys, you go ahead and beat the drum on your soft skill business, but it's really about, dollars and cents and accounting and profit and loss. Well, one of the things that we like to say and point out is that, accounting and sales and profit and expense, that's the score sheet of how well the relationships are going. How strong are the relationships between departments so that you keep your costs down? How strong is the relationship between your company and your employees so you can keep, your customers, so you can keep innovating and anticipating the needs they have. So just to put some meat on that bone of relationships being the heart of the business, it really is.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's probably the biggest, foundational pillar to our business as well.
Yes.
Relationships, as you said, is a soft skill, but I think it goes so much deeper than that too. It's a baseline for a lot of hard skills as well. So,
and with all of that sitting on the table in the first couple minutes of this podcast, let's not forget, what I think motivates me, and I think you too, as it relates to just the overall mission in life. And, the fact of the matter is that the quality of our life, it comes down to the quality of our relationships. If things are going really, really, really good, many times humble, grateful people look around and be appreciative of the relationships that they have. On the converse, sometimes, when things aren't going so great, we talk about this, the quality of our clients, how good it is and how grateful we are for the quality of our clients. But when things aren't going well, sometimes we're in relationships, we're in a toxic environment at work. We've let our personal key relationships with spouses, family members, kids kind of get into a tough place. And so life's greatest joys and pains, if not all the time, almost all the time, comes down to relationships.
Well, and you brought up a good point there too, how poor relationships in business can affect personal life, things like that. And how many examples do we probably have of different relationships and levels of relationships or at statuses of relationships in business? I think is one of the leaders of the Great Resignation, right? A word all of you have
just
heard
thinking that same thing
many times, and poor relationships have led to the Great Resignation. I'll just say it as straight up as that. I mean, one of the reasons I left a former employer was because of poor relationships.
For sure.
Untrusting relationships. Some people out there might might really this might really resonate with you. Something where maybe you have a leader who promises you something and then doesn't give it to you, and that cycle just gets beat down so much and you just can't take it anymore, so you decide to leave. Or to your face they'll say one thing but behind closed doors they're saying a different thing, right? Poor relationships, just toxic relationships are a very dangerous thing for businesses.
And I just want to get kind of deep on that those are all really frustrating things, which I think on the surface can be painful and frustrating.
Yeah, no doubt.
One of the most difficult things in all relationships is when the other party or the other person doesn't see us for who we really are.
Yeah.
They think they know us in the way that they see us through their filters and their perspective, but when they don't take the time or make the effort to truly get to know what, rather than assuming they know what we think or feel about things, asking some of those questions. And, when we work with clients, one of the most popular words is engaging. We're pulling from people rather than pushing so many times. And so I think that when you talk about, the Great Resignation, people weren't leaving businesses. People were leaving people.
Yeah. Oh, that's very true.
Underappreciated.
Very true.
Misunderstood.
Yeah.
Just toxic environment. I remember being in a very... one of the most challenging moments of my whole life, and I was sitting with somebody and I said that the person was trying to get me to do some stuff, and I said I just need you to be with me. Okay, I just need you to be with me, and that's it. And the other person looked me in the eye and said, I can't do that. For me, being a good friend is trying to get you to see things from a different perspective. And I was like, wow, that is. I'm telling you what, just fundamentally I need from a very primal standpoint. This is what I need. And to have that person look back and say, no, here's what you need. You need to look at things from a different perspective. And so that happens a lot in business.
Yeah.
That happens a ton
for sure
in business, and being able to engage people and, understand. And so,
a lot of these things sound like communication. How much good communication plays into good relationships.
It is, Adam, but I think that when you make the decision that a relationship is important, okay, that it's meaningful, that it has value, when you make that choice, then I think everything else inside us aligns to make that relationship healthy and productive, and communication is certainly part of it. And so if you think that, if I spent all my time thinking, well, there's an age and experience difference between, Adam McGuire and I'm gonna help him see things from a different perspective for the whole, aspect of our relationship. We're not gonna have a very good relationship. But if I say this is a dynamic individual that, we relate on a lot of things, but there's some other things that I can really learn, and then I show up every day to but to treasure you, to be very grateful for all of that stuff, then you know what I mean? Then our communication, my communication, I'm not just talking about the communication where I'm sending messages to you, but how I receive messages from you. And I think that, when we're talking about, relationships in life and in business, a lot of times it's your ability to build that relationship many times is to be there for that other person, to show up the way that they need you without sacrificing who you are.
Yeah. And if you're, we already touched on like some things that as an employee you might relate to, but as maybe if you're an owner, a leader, a manager, director, any title at an organization, as you're listening to this kind of stuff, I don't want to say shameless plug because it's not really what I'm getting at, but do you feel like the relationships in your professional life and in your business, if you're an owner or leader, do you feel like that's the level of the relationships that you have? Do you see that that's what the level of relationships that your directors or managers have with their, direct reports? Do you feel like that's what's going on in your business, or do you feel like that's where you're lacking? Do you feel like is that ringing a bell, and is that something that's kind of hitting you saying like, yeah, we really should be working on this? Because I think even, everybody knows me, I come from a very large marketing background. And I think just from my line of work alone, you look at relationship driven or transactional driven relationships. That doesn't really make sense, but you know what I'm getting at, right? Like, and how these days it's much more about the relationships that you build internally and externally, or more specifically with the customer or your employees, the first customer of the business, rather than everything being so transactional. If you have leaders, to relate to another one of our podcasts, if you have leaders that are focused too much in the business and not on the business, they're going to lose sight of that.
Right.
And more things are going to be transactional and operational rather than focusing on some of those soft skills and making sure people are taken care of, and healthy, trusting, vulnerable relationships that really, they're the first cheerleaders in the first line of defense. They're going to be there for somebody, and that's what's going to raise the business up.
Yes. When you said shameless plug, it made me think about this industry event we're doing. I think it's in September. And, we're doing this energizing critical relationships. And so one of the things that I think anybody can do in or out of business is, if you're listening to this thinking, I relate to what these guys are saying. And, what can I do to, create better, healthier relationships? And I think the first thing that people can do is, number one, look around and what are the most important or critical, meaningful relationships that you have. That's number one. Number two is, do they know that? Have you taken the time to say, this is very, very meaningful to me? And many times when people take that advice and they do it, many times the other person is like, what are you talking about? Of course I know that. You're one of my most important relationships. Oh. But then when you get to that next level, it's like, this relationship is important to me, but it's not in as good a shape as it should be. You can look at what are you doing in those best relationships that aren't happening in the not so good. And I'm talking about bad, but some of the relationships that are, they're fine, they're going along, they're kind of productive, but they're not thriving. They're not great. What are you doing in those very best relationships that you can, copy or, cut and paste into, the more average ones? So I think that's another thing that people can do with relationships.
Absolutely. Another thing people might relate to if you're watching this is you might work in a business and think, I have this really difficult relationship with a coworker or in another function or line of my business. And, they always seem to either blow up a meeting, or they're not including people, or there's some game playing going on. And they might think oh my God, how do I navigate those really tough relationships like that? Where it's not necessarily about I want that relationship to be very close with me, but it might mean, or it might be more I just want that relationship to be a good working relationship.
Yes.
We don't have to be best friends and get along and have a really deep relationship, but you also want to learn how to be able to work with some of those people that might not be maybe necessarily looking for the same thing that you're looking for, or even trying to accomplish that same thing too. And just how do you get some of those difficult relationships on track, or how to work with those difficult people? That just might be another thing people are thinking about when we talk about relationships as well.
So that brings up another relationship point that I think is important. And again, I think most people that have watched this for the last year and are plugged into this, I was about to say some of you might roll your eyes, but many of you probably won't. And we can't forget that relationship that we have with ourselves. And so when you talk about, our tolerance, our ability to put up with, other people, I think that's what you were getting at. There's a foundational leadership program that I do for one client, and we kick that whole program off by saying that leadership starts with ourselves. There's we let ourselves down more from a leadership standpoint than we do anybody else. We make commitments that we break to ourselves. We let each other, ourselves down. We make up stories. We make excuses, and so on and so forth. And so I think when you mentioned that piece, a lot of times we can be much more effective at those external relationships, meaning with other people, when we are building a good relationship with ourselves. When we're being honest, when we're following through on commitments, when we have the discipline, when you delay gratification and take care of the important things first and all that other stuff. When we take care of that, and the relationship with ourselves is physical, it's emotional, it's mental, it's relational, and all that other stuff. And so when we can do that here, we increase our odds of being able to do that, with other people. Yeah.
And in efforts to not make the this podcast too long, because I feel like this is a topic we could just keep going and going. So my thought is, as this podcast comes to a close, how do we wrap this all together? Because I think you just brought up a really, really valid point that I'm glad we didn't, miss talking about today. But, putting all these things together, there might have been one or two or the whole thing that resonated with you as an employer, a leader, an owner, of a business. How would we, put everything together? Obviously, it's make sure, you're taking care of yourself first and foremost, physically, emotionally, mentally.
Yeah.
And then the quality of the relationships you want to look at. What else? How would you wrap it all kind of together?
Well, that's a huge question for one. And so I think that maybe after this, we need to like literally talk, because I think there's some other follow-ups that we can do to this.
For
That's
sure.
number one.
This might be part one podcast.
But I do think that getting with a professional coach, a professional counselor, people who don't know you, okay? Many times we want to confide and do stuff with people that we know because it's safe. In some cases, we can outright manipulate them or we can explain things away. But I can't underscore the value of hiring professional people to help you get where you want to go. You know, and sometimes there might be a deficit that you want to overcome, and that's kind of a working on a weakness kind of thing. And there's a place for that. But in some cases, it's like, who do you feel called to be that you're not quite there yet? Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's a lot easier to work on achieving something, to going after something, than it is to fix something. In some cases, we need to fix it. But that would probably be my simple response to that question, is to get some professional facilitator, a coach, a counselor, or something like that. Talk to them, make sure it's the right person, and then ask them what their process is. How do you help me get to where I want to be? And hopefully they can lay out their methodology, the process with which they go about that. And if the person feels like there's good chemistry and their process makes sense to you, pour your whole self into it. And it will radically, and I'm going to use this word on purpose, transform you and your life. Not a more important relationship that you can have than the one you have with yourself.
There it is. I think that's a good place to wrap up relationships podcast. Awesome. It might be a part one. You never know. So you got to stay tuned. If we go part two, if we go straight to commitment, we'll see what happens. But thank you guys for tuning in today. Hopefully, you guys really learned something from today's. I mean, this one was a really important one for us too.
Good stuff, man.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. All right.